Some places become so romanticized online that people stop seeing what they are actually like in real life. This video is not about bad destinations. It is about places that are famous for a reason, but are often sold in a much softer, prettier, and easier version than the one travelers actually meet on the ground. If you only know them from social media, travel edits, or dreamy booking photos, the reality can feel very different. And that matters, because the problem is not always the destination. Very often, it is the expectation. Number 10, the Bahamas. The Bahamas looks like pure tropical ease online. Turquoise water, bright sand, boats, resorts, and that effortless Caribbean fantasy. And yes, that side is real. But what gets removed from the fantasy version is how uneven the experience can feel once you leave the polished image. There are real crime concerns in parts of the country, especially in areas like Nassau and Freeport, and that immediately changes the tone of what many people imagine will be a simple paradise trip. So the problem here is not that the Bahamas is fake, it is that the online version usually looks smoother, safer, and easier than the real travel experience can feel. Number 9. Tulum, Mexico. Tulum has been sold as the ultimate barefoot luxury dream. Jungle boutique hotels, soft light, beach clubs, wellness aesthetics, and a kind of curated beautiful people minimalism. But in real life, Tulum often feels far less magical than the image suggests. The logistics can be frustrating, the prices can feel inflated, the traffic can be exhausting, and the commercial side is much harder to ignore once you are actually there. And beyond the aesthetic layer, official guidance for Quintana Roo still warns about criminal violence in the wider state, which matters because many tourists treat the whole area as if it is just one big, effortless escape. Tulum still photographs beautifully. That is exactly why it lands here. 8. Kyoto, Japan. Kyoto is one of the most romanticized city breaks in the world. Traditional streets, shrines, soft light, quiet temples, old Japan preserved. And those elements are real. But what many travelers underestimate is how much tourism pressure changes the feeling of the city, especially in the most iconic districts. The online version makes Kyoto feel meditative, almost suspended in time. The real version can be far more crowded, more structured, and less intimate than people imagine. This does not make Kyoto bad. It makes it a classic example of a place where the emotional expectation is often much bigger than the experience can realistically deliver. 7. Amalfi Coast, Italy. The Amalfi Coast is one of the clearest fantasy destinations in Europe. It looks cinematic from every angle. Cliffs, sea, terraces, pastel towns, elegant hotels. But this is one of those places where beauty and friction live right next to each other. In peak season, the roads are crowded, transfers can be slow, movement between towns is not nearly as easy as the dream version suggests, and the overall experience can become much more logistical than romantic. What people often romanticize is not the place itself. It is the edited version of moving through it with no stress, no lines, no transport pressure, and no cost anxiety. That version is not what most travelers actually get. Number 6. Phuket, Thailand. Phuket gets sold in two very different ways, either as tropical paradise or as cheap luxury, sometimes both at once. And parts of Phuket absolutely can feel beautiful. But one of the biggest mismatches here is how many people arrive expecting serenity and discover a much busier, more commercial, and more built-up resort environment than they imagined. It is not just about beaches, it is about the broader holiday atmosphere. The online version often strips away the traffic, the density, the noise, the overdevelopment, and the parts of the island that feel much more mass tourism driven than dreamlike. That gap between image and atmosphere is exactly why Phuket belongs here. If you like travel content that helps you see the real picture before you book, subscribe to CHA87 Travel Guide. For 5, Paris, France. Paris may be the most romanticized city on Earth. No city benefits more from carefully framed images. The fantasy is timeless: beauty, elegance, quiet cafes, moonlight, architecture, romance, and Paris absolutely has that side. But what gets cut out is how intense the city can also feel. The queues, the density, the fast pace, the petty theft risk in major tourist areas, the cost and the pressure of trying to do Paris properly in a short trip. Paris is still one of the world's great destinations, but it is also one of the clearest examples of a city people often love first as an idea. Number 4. Dubai, UAE. Dubai is romanticized in a different way. Not as old-world beauty, but as seamless luxury. The online version is all skyline, pools, perfect hotels, glossy restaurants, supercars, and polished excess. But what many first-time visitors do not expect is how curated and controlled the experience can feel. The scale can be tiring, the heat can be oppressive, and the city can feel much more car-dependent and manufactured than the fantasy suggests. Dubai is not disappointing because it lacks spectacle. It is disappointing for some people because the emotional reality is less organic than the online promise. 3. Bali, Indonesia. Bali has become one of the biggest fantasy destinations on the internet. It gets sold as peace, spirituality, jungle luxury, freedom, beauty, softness, healing, and escape. And that version does exist in parts. But it is also one of the destinations where social media has probably done the most to distort reality. Traffic, crowding, overdevelopment in certain hotspots, inflated expectations, and the gap between image and lived experience can hit hard. A lot of travelers go to Bali expecting stillness. What they get instead depends heavily on where they go, how they travel, and how much of the Instagram version they believed. That is why Bali lands so high. Number 2. Venice, Italy. Venice is one of the most extraordinary places in the world. That is exactly why it is so heavily romanticized. The fantasy is quiet canals, mysterious streets, elegance, beauty, and timelessness. The reality, on many days, is crowd pressure. Day trippers, tour groups, limited space, seasonal congestion, and the feeling that the city is carrying more visitors than the fantasy version admits. Even the fact that Venice has expanded visitor fee mechanisms in recent years tells you something important. The overcrowding issue is real enough to require active management. Venice is still extraordinary, but it is one of the clearest examples of a place where the fantasy and the lived experience often drift far apart. Number 1. Santorini, Greece. And at number 1, Santorini. Because few places on Earth are sold harder as a perfect dream. The white buildings, blue domes, sunset views, honeymoon aura, luxury terraces, infinity pools, volcanic beauty. It is one of the strongest destination fantasies in global travel. And that is exactly the problem. Santorini is so visually powerful online that people arrive expecting a kind of flawless emotional experience. But in real life, peak season crowds, packed viewpoints, cruise ship pressure, limited space, and infrastructure strain can change the entire atmosphere. It is still beautiful. It is still famous for a reason. But no place on this list is more romanticized relative to how pressured and crowded the real experience can become. That is why Santorini is number 1. The problem with these places is not always the destination itself. Very often, it is the version people build in their heads before they ever get there. So which place do you think tourists romanticize too much?